guys feel the ire of the rest of the nation and or the Big 12? Does it feel like you're a target? Like people hate Texas football? Do you feel that at all?
I'll touch on the SEC piece and what it's allowed us to do, and then I'll let Clint talk about the Big 12 and the ramifications there. What we found out was SEC is bigger. It's just bigger. Because the moment we dropped our SEC or Texas to the SEC podcast, you had Georgia fans, you had Tennessee fans, you had Gator fans, you had LSU fans, and of course, Alabama fans on our channel, welcoming us to the SEC. So I've not felt any ire from the SEC part. I think if we come in there and like folks say, if we don't think we're the guy at the table and we just fall in with those other 16 teams and just play football or basketball or baseball, then I've felt nothing but welcome, both on our Twitter. We're followed by almost 2,500 Twitter followers. We have social media just about everywhere, and I've never felt the SEC fans not being welcome. Now, Clint can talk about how we feel there is definitely a target in the Big 12.
Yeah, kind of to see that off that, it's crazy because during our lives, we've been doing this for a year, and we do lives kind of like this where people are commenting in, and you've never seen anybody like Baylor or Oklahoma State. Every once in a while, we'd get like a Texas A&M, somebody to comment on our lives or someone someone from Oklahoma. But as soon as we did a live, it was crazy how all these fans from these SEC schools joined into our lives. That's what made it seem really bigger to me, is that maybe they're more passionate about football there in the Southeast Conference. And, you're talking about the best, probably an opportunity to go to the best division and the best conference in all of college football. Talk about the Big 12. Absolutely. I think that when you're talking about the ire of the Big 12, you can call them the irate eight or there's a whole bunch of names out there for these 8 teams that are being left behind. But yeah, there's a target on your back each and every week. And I think that Texas has always had a target on the back, and people are going to show up as if Texas is their biggest game. But I think, going into this season, you're talking about going to some of these, locations like, Ames, Iowa. You got to go to Fort Worth. These guys are going to be angry. These fans are going to be angry. And so if Texas and Oklahoma didn't have a bullseye on their back before this season, which they usually have, it's definitely grown. It has definitely grown.
Charlie Strong recruited top 10 to 5 to 15 classes, as well as Tom Herman. So what didn't go wrong, or what went wrong? What were the failings year after year after year, where really there was only one season borderline expectations were met in that 2018 campaign with a Sugar Bowl win?
So I can tell you, me and Clint are really tied into recruiting. Like we have guys on from 247 Sports who are recruiting analysts. We have, current 22 commits that have come on and done interviews with us this year. And we understand, and a lot of times you got to talk Texas folks into understanding just what you said, Mark. And that's since 2010, you really haven't competed like the likes of Alabama, Ohio State, and Clemson. So why do you expect to continue to recruit on that level when you haven't developed players? Number one, you haven't competed and won a Big 12 championship. That's number one. Number two is you haven't sent anybody into the draft on day 1 or 2. And so to us, it's always been about, but then if you look, you went from Todd Orlando to Chris Ash to Pete Witkowski. You went from Tim Beck to Mike Yursich to now Kyle Flood. The constant turnover of coaches, the constant turnover of systems. I don't care what kind of 4-star, 5-star recruit you are. If you got to continue to change the way you play year in and year out, it's going to be a problem. You're not going to set yourself up for success. So one is we got to solidify our coaching staff and keep them long enough to where they can put their schemes into fruition, because it's not going to matter. Again, our last 2 top draft picks, Sam Cosme, Joe Osai, and Connor Williams, weren't 5-star recruits. So it's a problem with winning and player development. That's the disconnect that Texas has had over the last 10 years. Clint, you got something to add?
No, you pretty much nailed it. To me, it comes down to development of players. You've had these top classes. If you go back and look at blue chip ratios, there's terms out there, blue chip ratios, how many 4- and 5-star players you have, versus the other other teams that are out there, the Alabamas, the Ohio States, hell, the LSUs. the Clemsons, the list goes on and on and on about these 4 and 5 stars and what the blue chip ratio is. But when you have a team that I think we're currently at like 61%, 5-star and 4 stars this year, if you would have went back and looked last year with where we thought we were going to come in as a position of strength in the Big 12, you had I think 66% blue chip ratio number, 4s and 5 stars, which was number 5 in the nation. So if you're not developing players, you're recruiting, eventually you can't continue to sell the same bill of goods. And that's what Texas is up against at this particular point. You can't say, okay, hey, come in 5-star. I need you to come to the University of Texas. Now we want to have you help us get the program to the next level. That's what they've been selling year after year after year with each one of these coaching staffs. To me, this particular point, in order to get those recruiting rankings to where they need to go moving forward, Sark and his staff have to be able to develop the players they currently have on the roster. And that's 4-star, 5-star, and 3-star. That's kind of where we're at.
Yeah, just to hit on that, I mean, if you look at the weekend preseason games, look at all the Texas players that balled out in the preseason. P.J. Locke, I'm a Broncos fan. P.J. Locke and Caden Sturge played really well. They're going to make the team. And Caden Sturge probably will start some games if someone gets hurt. Sam Cosmi, I think, was the highest graded offensive lineman on Saturday for the preseason. I mean, it's just pathetic at what we've done with development-wise. I mean, these guys clearly have talent because they get undrafted or underdrafted in the NFL, and then they go into ball in the NFL. I mean, Poona Ford's a really good example of that. I just don't understand it. And if Sark can just do that, where he gets these 3 4-star guys to play above and beyond what they're supposed to do, or just where they're supposed to be at, we'll be fine. And I think hopefully he can do that.
And you're on it, dude. Like he treats his player personnel department like the NFL. Again, he's talked about having his recruiting classes like his draft classes, his transfer portal is treating like free agency. But he said that we have to be the number 1 developmental staff in the country, number 1. And number 2, we're going to fit our recruiting model to our scheme. We're going to stop just grabbing these great players who are 4 and 5 stars by Rivals, ESPN, and 247. We're going to look with, that's going to tell them where to look, but they're going to look really, really closely and make sure that player, a good example is Champ Lewis, this recent 2022 commit, 6'2", long rangey corner. He's in the top 1,000. He's a 3-star, but when you talk about scheme fit, he's exactly the type of corner that Terry Joseph wants, that Blake Gideon wants in their secondary. And again, he's got to sell that to Pete Kwiatkowski, who's a proven defensive coordinator, who has to sell it to Steve Sarkisian for that kid to get a scholarship offer.
And that's the thing too. For an example for that would be kind of like basketball. I mean, Shaka Smart, I think, got these higher rated guys, but then brought them in and pushed them in a system. I think we were kind of doing that in football as well, where we bring in like these 4 and 5 star guys, but they didn't really fit in our system, and we kind of forced them into our system. Whereas I'd rather have 3-star guys that fit into the system and know what they're doing. That just makes more sense to me.
Yeah, I want to just add to that real quick. So I can't remember the numbers off the top of my head, and I was kind of trying to look them up here. Between 2010 and 2019, drafted players between Texas and Washington. And it tells you the difference between, Pete Kwiatkowski and what he's doing with those players at Washington versus what Texas has done, be able to do with, the 4 and 5-star guys they're getting at Texas, which is crazy. I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, I think between 2010 and 2019, University of Washington had 19 drafted players. And I think majority of those guys were 4-star and 3-star players. And I think 1 2-star player. And if you go look at what Texas did in that same time frame, they've had 10 players drafted in the NFL. So I think what you've done is you've got a mixture of good NFL guys that have been at the NFL level, guys that have been in championship programs, but then you get the guys like Choate and Pete Kwiatkowski, and Bo Davis that are going to be able to develop these players to where they need to go. I can tell you that that's probably the most exciting. I think that's what excites me the most, man. Really. About what's going on the 40 acres right now. And it's really not just the football team, but it's the coaching staff that we currently have. And you go back and listen, I think they did a media availability with Kyle Flood, offensive coordinator, offensive line coach today. And they did one with Pete Kwiatkowski. I think that's the first time we've had an opportunity to listen to him today, as soft-spoken as he is. But I'm really excited about where this coaching staff and how they can develop the team moving forward.